So, welcome back for our third discussion together on the reason for God. We're talking about issues that make Christianity untenable for many, many people. And our topic for tonight, let me read it, sounds like this. What gives you the right to tell me how to live my life? Why are there so many rules? Let me flesh that out. Christianity is often seen as an enemy of freedom, of authentic personhood, social cohesion, because it appears that Christians are telling everybody else how they ought to live their lives instead of giving them the right to decide what is right or wrong for them. There was a philosopher, Diderot, who had a very quaint little saying. He said, "There will be no freedom until the last king is strangled on the entrails of the last priest." And I'm hoping nobody here takes that literally, for my own sake, but he's saying it in a very startling way. But his main point is that religion is as much an enemy of freedom as totalitarianism. See, in other words, a king is as bad as a priest. What do you think? I mean, I know that's overstatement, but do you think that Christian moral claims are an impediment to freedom? What do you think?
No, because a king has absolute power when a priest has barriers to power.
I think my problem is, like, I'm not exactly sure what freedom means. This sounds like an Eddie question, but I think it's difficult for me to understand what the rules actually are.
Isn't that what psychotherapy is about, though? Breaking rules that we've made for ourselves that are unsuccessful. We ask ourselves why our life isn't working out.
And just to add on that, it seems like a lot of it is actually just human interpretation. Like, what is actually solid foundation, what the actual beliefs are, and what is interpretation by, humans as to what they actually think it is. So it comes down to that, I think.
Yeah, but I think his original question is, like, who tells you how to live your life? And with the Constitution as, like, a government, whether it's a king or a president, it's something that can be changed, something that people can express their need to be amended. And with the Bible, there's really not that option. I feel like everybody has rules, and I believe that whether your parents give them to you, or a pastor or a priest or a teacher or a babysitter or a brother or a sister or an employer, everybody will give you rules. But it doesn't matter. If the only way that you will follow those rules is if you respect the person that's giving them to you.
This question is very interesting. The question is, who gives you the right to tell me how to live my life, and why are there so many rules? I think we're talking about within a Christian framework, and I think I'd like to sort of go up in altitude a little bit, because I think that's a good sort of question that, you know, someone who's not of the faith can talk about. I believe there are, every moment in our life, we're following someone's rules, period. It's not sort of biblical. We follow parent rules, we follow economic policy. Those are ways that rules are enforced. So we can't really escape it. It's a matter of being conscious of knowing whose rules we're following. And then that said, I think structure or rules, I sort of equate the two, are necessary for freedom. I think there's actually, we can have, it's called an abyss of liberty, where there's too much freedom, and then you become paralyzed because there's too many options. So I think freedom and rules actually are one and the same. I think you need both. You can't have one without the other.
Actually, I think Eddie's made two statements. I'd love to hear you out on with them. The first one is that everybody does have rules. Everybody does make a decision about what is right and wrong, and then you feel like you ought to follow them. They are rules for you. You feel a sense of obligation, and you can't just shrug them off. And so you, I think, are saying that it's not just Christians, and it's not even just religious people, but actually everybody comes up with a decision about what is right and what is wrong, feels obligated, and therefore everybody's working off rules.
And I think they exist. Whether they're explicit or not,
yes,
is another question.
What do the rest of you think?
All rules are self-imposed at some level. I mean, you have to take responsibility for what you're going to follow. But of all the things that Eddie was saying, even going to sleep, we have to follow these things that are self-generated.
And not just self-generated. I mean, I've got young kids, so we're busy imposing rules every day.
That's right.
And the rules are empowering in the sense of if they didn't follow the rules, for example, they wouldn't have friends. You know, if they didn't follow the rules, they wouldn't be able to go to school. If they didn't follow the rules, they wouldn't be able to go out by themselves, basically. So we're teaching them rules that help them. So Now, a lot of what we're teaching them is borrowed from the Bible. Even if we're not, Christians, it's still borrowed from the Bible. It's in relationship to the Constitution. It's in relationship to a lot of other unspoken rules or socialization. One of the things is when you talk to somebody, you look in their eye. I'm not sure it's in the Bible, but it's in sort of the sort of cultural thing that we teach them, basically.
Within your culture, though.
Within our culture,
That's
exactly.
actually not in my culture. It's
Yeah,
actually
I know.
threatening to look in the eye a little bit. Actually.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think I resist that, the idea that there is some higher authority that knows everything. I don't necessarily resist the idea that there are rules that I can follow or should follow or would be better for me to follow. I have a lot of trouble, however, with the idea that they are written down somewhere, that they are, in a book that's 2,000 years old or however many thousand years old it is, and that, it's sort of doing that or damnation, that kind of thing.
I think life at every moment presents us with these moments that we sort of start creating rules, or we articulate rules around something like thou shalt not kill thy neighbor or covet thy neighbor's wife, or a lot of neighbor stuff. And then what happens is they become sort of, we have to transfer these best learning practices, best life practices to our children, and then they become, rules. They become very short, simple rules. And I think that's what happens. And in the Bible, I think, was a moment in time where instead of just sort of passing it down to your children, we decided to make an attempt to codify it in stories and such. And there are a lot of other religions that have done the same. So that's where I think this the meeting point is about rules and structure and religion come together.
An example I often like to use is, if I eat whatever I want to eat, then I will have terrible health and maybe die in my 40s from a heart attack. If I restrict myself because my body needs certain kinds of food, that is, I'm limiting myself, and even though it's hard in the short run, in the long run, I thrive and I live a longer time and I can do more things. Or exercise. In exercise, I don't like to do exercise because it's very hard work, but in the long run, if I do it, I feel better. And so would it not be, therefore, the case that morally, it's hard to forgive, it's hard to sometimes show respect when you don't want to, it's hard to refrain from certain things, but in the long run, there's more freedom if we refrain. And therefore, by limiting yourself and submitting to some rules, it actually creates freedom instead of diminishing it.
There's certain rules associated with Christianity that I don't object to. I think they're beneficial. Most of the 10 Commandments, I think, fall into that category. I think what I'm primarily concerned with and really curious about are the rules that are served to ostracize others and to demonize others.
I think the deepest value being honored in all of this is still the value of reciprocity. I mean, that's kind of where it all comes from. Like, if all of us have it, because if we didn't, there would be no morality or rules. If you don't believe that we all should have the similar rules apply to us, none of this works. So we all kind of come from there, and therefore, like, a genocide notion won't work because, we don't want it done on us, so we're not going to do it onto them. That's sort of the foundation for me.
But you would say it's wrong, not just impractical. Genocide.
Yeah, maybe your point. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. That makes sense.
Our passion with following that might come from some underlying feeling of sacredness. I mean, it's just not that it is, the reciprocity. I have to experience some form of genocide to form an opinion about it. I have this overwhelming